Greetings, loved ones, and welcome back to another episode of Kaiju Curry House, the British bi-weekly show giving you a healthy dose of kaiju action. This is episode 95. I'm joined by my co-hosts Paul and Joe, and tonight we have a special guest, Mr. Pierce Berolzheimer. Was that name right?
Yep.
Awesome. And you are the director, producer, and writer for the 2021 film Crabs. How's it going?
Come on. It has an exclamation point. Crabs! Come on, Alex. Go for it.
Crabs!
There we go.
That's
better.
There we go. Paul, what have Kaiju been up to?
Joe, I haven't been up to a massive amount, I'm afraid, because, we've had a bank holiday weekend, I've been away, stuff, but I have been playing Dawn of the Monsters.
Yes.
How's it going?
So I finally got on with that. I've only done the first part, but I've really enjoyed it so far. I haven't gone quite in depth of how to upgrade my kaiju, but I've enjoyed smashing buildings, ripping off heads, and just generally beating up monsters. Because each level's only about 10 minutes long, so it's just a nice little de-stress at the end of the day.
Great pickup game, isn't it?
It is, pick up and play. So really enjoying Dawn of the Monsters, but I'm hoping to get a bit more in depth with it as time goes on. But other than that, I haven't really read, watched, or done anything. So brief from me. Joe, what have Kaiju been up to?
Right. Absolutely not related to kaiju whatsoever, but definitely a force of nature. I watched some episodes of Captain Planet over the weekend, which is great. I did see some of the leaks for the new Avatar movie that's coming out in December, which I thought was really cool. It has some great alien creatures in it, so I was really happy to see that. I saw the second long-length trailer for Jurassic World come out, and once again, it has totally derailed my taste for that film. It's spectacular special effects, but raptors that will jump underneath ice and start swimming after people, I thought that was a bit far-fetched, so it kind of took my breath away in a bad way. What else? Not to seem like a hater. I'm still probably going to see it.
And you'll still love it. You'll love it.
I am excited for Apple TV's Planet Dinosaur, narrated by Sir David Attenborough, which is going to be perfect. So I look forward to that. And I took out my copy of Howl from Beyond the Fog from SRS Cinema over the weekend and just had a quick watch of that because it had been a while. So that is what I have been up to in the world of large, dangerous, scaly things and awesome forces of nature. I also watched Crabs, to be fair.
Cool.
There was some kaiju action going on there. Shouldn't forget that. So, Pierce, what have Kaiju been up to?
Working on finishing up Crabs and trying to get it out in the world, but also playing a bunch of Elden Ring, which I don't know if that technically counts as kaiju, but there's some
creatures in that.
Are there gnarly monsters?
Solid monsters in that.
We'll allow that.
And I'm terrible at it, but it's
no, it's not you. It's the game. The game is just brutal.
It's really brutal.
Yeah,
but it's fun. It's the monster designs are just awesome. I mean, they're just so cool looking. But I run away from most of them.
Do we have a shout out for any particular one that's like more gnarly than the others?
I have so little time to actually play games that, like Elden Ring, I'm the type of person that doesn't pay attention to any of the lore or any of the names of the monsters or anything like that. I just run in and try to fight.
Yeah.
So
I'm sure there's a fan base somewhere screaming.
Oh, I know. There's like a hashtag. It's like no lore, only murder, and that follows how I play Elden Ring pretty solidly.
Okay. Because they've got George R.R. Martin, haven't they, doing the writing for it? So
yeah, but I don't know. I don't see his fingerprints anywhere. It just seems like Dark Souls, the new Dark Souls. So I don't know.
Can I make a quick comment here? Wasn't he supposed to be finishing a book?
Yeah, apparently. I heard that.
Is it?
Rumor has it.
Isn't it the Winds of Winter?
I feel like after the final season of the TV show, it's amazing how it went from being a global phenomenon to suddenly no one cared. It just kind of gone.
Well, I feel like, okay, so there are two ways of looking at this. Either nobody cared or all the questions were answered.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like the burn and the anxiety and the passion of waiting for your answers for like 8 years, was it?
Mm-hmm.
And then they get answered all at once. I feel
That's
like
dramatic.
it's just the catharsis.
Maybe. All I know is that like every so often I'll get your memories on Facebook and I'll go, oh, what's this? And I'll think it's like a lovely family photo. It's a flaming Game of Thrones meme. And it's like, I remember that. Wow, that's not relevant. That's dead now because it was so kind of quintessentially of that time period and then gone. So it's no longer relevant to me. In my opinion.
What was your favorite scene in Game of Thrones?
Piers?
Oh, me?
Yeah. You're the man who cares right now.
My favorite scene in Game of Thrones. The trial, Tyrion's trial, I think. I think the acting in Tyrion's trial was
Oh yeah, he totally
some of the
deserved
best.
that award. He blew it away.
That was
amazing.
awesome.
I'm
Oh,
going to go with
Joffrey's death was pretty cool.
that was a catharsis for everybody. That's true.
That was pretty brutal. I liked how brutal that was.
I feel like in terms of a segue for Crabs, Oberon's death when like his face just sort of like splattered everywhere.
Yeah.
Oh, that got me. Oberyn was my favorite character.
He was everyone's favorite. Yeah.
Because
Did you read
like,
the books? Did you know it was coming?
I did not. No, I'm still recovering off it.
I read the books post series.
Oh, okay.
And the books are so much better. But like Oberyn's death, still like I remember watching that and I was just no. He was the cool one.
He was the cool one. Like everyone fancied him, and that's why Mandalorian did so well because they got a chance to watch, Oberon again. It was glorious. Pierce, you are the director, writer, and producer of Crabs from 2021, and many of our listeners have probably watched the trailer. However, they might not know much about it. What is Crabs?
Yeah, so Crabs is a monster movie that is sort of my my love letter to all the different monster movies. There's, I grew up with Gremlins, but I also grew up with Alien, and I also grew up with Godzilla. And so I wanted to make a movie that took all the sort of genre staples of monster movies and put them into one thing. So I wanted to have all the different sizes of monster and sort of have a movie that went through the history of monster movies with each act. So each act is sort of a different style of monster movie. And yeah, it's technically a 2021 movie because we premiered in the UK in 2021 at a festival. But the only place it's out right now is Australia and France. So it's going to be released in 2022, even if it's technically 2021.
It's a brand new movie, really.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And like you've spoken about your inspiration for the film, talking about Alien, you mentioned Gremlins. What is the general premise of Crabs? Like in a nutshell.
The basic idea is this kid, Philip McAllister, is in a wheelchair and he wants to dance with his friend/girlfriend at prom. And so he uses this ridiculous made up scientific technology to try to build these mechanical legs so he can dance at prom. All the while, these mutated horseshoe crabs attack the town. And then it's up to this weird, eclectic group of locals to try to save the day.
How do we pronounce our foreign friend's name?
Radu.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure, I got that completely right because I loved him. He was my favorite. Hands down.
He's great. Chase is amazing. The actor that plays Radu he's
going places, that's for sure. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Loved Radu. Yeah. So we actually had a question. We had a write-in on my side. Emily asked, how come it's always the ugly creatures that get monster movies? How come, you went for horseshoe crabs, so to speak, rather than squirrels, which are terrifying. They can mob you. They throw acorns. They're already hostile. So why do we zero in on horseshoe crabs? Where's the passion?
That is a great question. And one of the things that I looked at for inspiration was the Monty Python and the Holy Grail scene with the rabbit.
The rabbit.
Because to me,
Amazing.
Animals that aren't dangerous are far more interesting to make into dangerous movies than animals that are inherently dangerous. Like I love the idea, like squirrels would be a great horror movie. Horseshoe crabs to me are like, they're super slow, they're totally harmless, and the weird ironic thing is that they look scary as hell. Like they look creepy. They're all
Sigourney Weaver doesn't like crabs or horseshoe crabs, that's for sure.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
You turn one over, it looks like the thing Paul has behind him.
It does. They look terrifying. They look really creepy. But I love the idea that they're actually they're completely, totally harmless. And so turning something that looked creepy already into something that was terrifying. I like the sort of it was easy to do because we basically just used the horseshoe crab shell as the template and then added some extra spines to it. So we knew we would have something that was inherently a little creepy to begin with. And that sort of did our job for us in the first act. But I also grew up going down to Georgia in the US and seeing they molt, so they leave their shells all over the beach. And I figured, somebody's going to do a movie about this. Like they're creepy looking. Somebody's eventually going to use this animal in a monster movie, but nobody did. And so it felt like this sort of, it's sitting right there and it's on a golden platter. I've got to use it.
Totally.
Yeah.
So the special effects for crabs, like, are any of those the molted shells? Because whoever made the actual crabs for your production, like, they did a bang up job. It was amazing. So Ray Harryhausen used a crab for one of his films. He just put an armature inside. So did you use a similar concept? Did you take a molted shell and use those, or was that something somebody made? Oh, wow.
Yep.
Okay. So
we took we had one sent to us from Georgia because we shot the movie in California, and there's no horseshoe crabs in California on the west coast of the US. Mm-hmm. So we had one sent, and we took the shell and then added some clay to it just to give it a little bit extra creepy factor. So we gave it some extra spines and made the ridges a little bit more like ridgy instead of as flat as it is, just to give it a little bit more personality. And then we had a bunch of different types of a bunch of different types of horseshoe crabs. So we did the ones that are just the shell, we molded on an actual shell, and then we made ones that you could put a remote control car in, and then we made ones that you could fill with blood and smash. We made a couple that like you could attach to somebody's face that had blood wires coming out of the back, so you could shoot blood out of the sides of it. But all of those are actually based on the original shell with some clay added, and then they were all a bunch of molds made from that. But yeah, we tried to keep it as biologically accurate as we could, without just using the shell itself.
Which is why I think it looks so good. Sorry.
Yeah, the shells, I mean, they look great. I mean, they're weird enough looking already that we didn't have to do much.
That's awesome. Yeah, I was gonna say, great job. I mean, like, all the painting and everything that went into those. As someone who does models himself, I gotta say, like, all the practical effects, they were well done. They were fantastic.
Thank you. Yeah, that was Jim Ojala was our creature effects guy, and he's amazing. He used to work on like Buffy the Vampire Slayer. He's done stuff for years and years and years. He started doing trauma movies. Yeah, he's awesome.
Buffy, that's awesome.
Yeah. That was wild. My girlfriend's favorite show is Buffy, and I had never seen Buffy. I'd seen like the movie, but I'd never seen the show. And so when we got together, we watched all of Buffy together, and she's probably seen it 5 or 6 times now, like from beginning to end. And when I found out that Jim had worked on Buffy, I like called him up a couple Christmases ago, and I'm like, "Hey, Jim, do you have any props that you've kept?" And he did. And he had, the only prop he had from his time working on Buffy was a pair of vampire teeth. Anyway, so I bought him from
as you would.
Yeah. On like with like a official Buffy stationery. And so while we were watching the show, we were like trying to point out where the teeth were in the show.
That's nice. I was going to say, someone who's very close to my heart loved Angel, and I was made to watch Angel But
Yeah,
I
he
never
worked on
watched
Angel
Buffy.
too.
I never watched Buffy. So Angel was just like, so what's going on now?
Yeah, I
Oh,
haven't
well.
seen Angel yet, but
Yeah, it's a trip, especially if you don't know any of the lore.
I can imagine that's pretty weird.
So we have the crab. So a bit of spoilers for folks that are listening, but I feel like in order to progress the discussion, we kind of have to reveal some things.
I think so.
Yeah.
So the crabs, they're exposed to, we'll just call it nuclear waste to keep things simple.
Science.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the scientists have been irresponsible again, ladies and gentlemen. And this time it's the horseshoe crabs that have paid the price. So there's a couple who are enjoying each other's company. This is not a children's film. So children, do not watch it. Parents, don't let your kids watch it while you're
They're
doing
hugging.
it. Yeah,
Hugging.
yeah, hugging.
They're hugging.
She really enjoyed that hug.
Yeah, we were texting as we were all watching it. Pierce, it was really funny. So I found, as that first scene was coming on, I found a George Talkie like, oh my, meme that I sent everybody, and then like, the crab starts attacking. So I just went to, oh no. But yeah, so the crab starts attacking, and we've learned, like the horseshoe crabs are not gentle creatures anymore. So the movie progresses from there. There's a bit of plot building with the characters, the town. We go and see them. We have the police officers who are kind of investigating some killings. There's a dead whale. The dead whale was a very nice piece, by the way. That was a good set piece, and it was very clever how you use the different perspective coming out from within its ribs to frame the police officers. That was really cool. So we've learned that something's been killing marine life, and it just kind of progresses from there to when the crabs start moving inward towards town. And we kind of have our dance scene, like you mentioned before. And I think that isn't necessarily the climax of the film, but it is like a good midpoint where we have carnage. Carnage is the word.
It's end of Act 2, isn't it? Because it's at the 1 hour mark. And
yeah, our acts are a little wonky in terms of timing. So the scene where they are the two leads are dancing together is our midpoint. Like that's actually the midpoint of the movie.
Okay.
And then the end of Act 2 is when they leave the school.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
In the script, we had to cut some scenes and stuff, so the timing isn't perfect. But in terms of narrative structure, that's the midpoint's the dancing point.
Yeah. When they killed the crabs and everything, I remember like looking at it and it's like, wait a second, we've got a lot of movie left. Where's this going? Oh, we had places, didn't it? Yeah. So at that point, we kind of move on to giant crabs. So you mentioned earlier that there's kind of like different points. I think you said Alien, Gremlins, and then Godzilla. Were like your inspirations. I can definitely see where the Alien vibe comes in, because we have crabs going straight for people's faces. I can see where the Gremlins motif kind of comes in, because you gave them a great sound effect. They don't just kind of like silently crawl along. Yeah, they have kind of like a gremlin-y sound when they go after people. And there was a scene that I really enjoyed where Radu and his like friends are just kind of like chilling out, maxing, relaxing, all cool. And then crabs. And that was pretty great. And then
Radu actually does, the actor who plays Radu does all the voices of the crabs throughout the movie.
That's nice.
He is multi-talented, I am telling you what. Wow. But yeah, I can get the Gremlins vibe from there. And then we went to the kaiju side of things, where we have not like larger mutated crabs, but we have like full-on kaiju rocking up. So that was pretty great. So I'm just curious, like structurally, why did you put the kaiju element in when you could have had like a queen crab or something like that? So was there any particular reason that you wanted to go with that narrative? Like,
the kaiju? Yeah.
Just they're cool, right?
Movies. Like I grew up doing like stop motion animation.
That's really cool.
That's how I got my start, was just like trying to make South Park basically. And I would, in school, instead of writing papers, I would ask my teachers if I could make like stop motion animations instead. And some of the time they would actually let me do it. And so I would, that's how I kind of got started. And so I love the just tactile working with materials when I make movies. And originally the kaiju fight at the end of the movie was supposed to be on a miniature set. And at one point I wanted to do it with stop motion animation. I wasn't exactly sure how to do it. I was like of two minds. I was thinking maybe I want to do like Ray Harryhausen stop motion, and maybe I want to do like 1950s Godzilla or Power Rangers or any of the guys in suits. And in the end, I decided on the guys in suits element of it, but then I really still wanted to build the miniature set, and I really wanted to do a like destroy the town and then have the final fight. But miniature sets are insanely expensive. Like,
yes, they are.
mind-blowingly expensive to do properly. And then you get one or two takes, and that's it. And so we couldn't afford it. And yeah, that was never going to happen. So
I think that, sorry, please.
Oh yeah, no, go for it. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think you've opened kind of like an awesome question there, and I would like to explore that in the next part, which is, what would you have done had you had like incrementally more of a budget? Because you've done so much with so little, really. And I'd love to kind of hear more about that. But what I was going to say was we have come to the end of our first part, and we're getting into some real meat of this film. So can we return in a moment?
Crab meat, delicious.
Crab.
Babe, you gotta take a picture with this.
Just be quick.
Okay.
Good afternoon, lunchtime, my classmates.
Hi, Radu.
All available units. We have a 19243. A dead whale washed up with a nasty slice in its belly.
Oh, sure as hell wasn't no shark down there.
Yeah, I'm guessing not.
Something's out there. That's for damn sure.
Mister, you alright? Yes.
Reports are coming in from fishermen all along the coast.
What are these things? Some unknown species of crabs.
I've never seen a 6-foot-tall crab. We need to call the army.
And tell them what? That we're being attacked by man-eating crabs?
We have to stop it.
So these perfectly adapted animals are now supercharged.
And what can stop something so jacked up?
Another perfectly evolved predator.
Let's do this.
Hello and welcome back to episode 95 of Kaiju Curry House. We are interviewing Pierce Berolzheimer, the director and producer of Crabs, which I can add an exclamation point to words.
You can and you will, and you did.
Yeah. America. Kids don't ask where that reference came from, kids. Anyway, we were talking about the plot and the structure of the film Crabs with Pierce, but it's a really interesting conversation to how this movie got started and where it came from. We were talking about it a little bit before the podcast, but from what you were telling me, Pierce, you wanted to make a film ever since you were 10, and you just made it happen. Do you want to go over that with us for, to inspire any amongst the crowd who may have the same ideas?
Yeah. So I started making stop motion animations when I was a kid. And then I made a bunch of shorts and stuff, and then got a job working for a producer. And the way that I learned how to work on a movie set basically was the movie had no money, and so I was like, I will work for basically just lodging and food if I can be in every meeting, and I'll do whatever you want. Like I'll get coffee, I'll clean up I'll do anything at all as long as I can be in the meetings with the producers and with the director and with the actors. I just want to like watch and observe and absorb as much as I possibly can. And so after about a week and a half of being on set for that film, they promoted me to co-producer, and then they hired me on another movie to as a producer. And then after that, they're like, well, we know you want to direct. Do you have a script? And I'm like, oh, I've got this other script. You know, we started going into pre-production and looking to raise money on this completely other movie. It was a possession movie, and it was kind of a cool idea, but it felt like what I was trying to do with that one was I was trying to hit the things that were popular at the time in order to sort of launch my career. And I had a conversation with one of the producers, and he was like, if you don't love this movie, if this is not a movie you would be happy working on it for 3, 4, 5 years, you're going to hate making movies. So don't do it. Like, don't make a movie unless it's the movie you really deep down want to make. And I'm like, well, actually the movie I really want to make is this Crabs movie that I wrote when I was 19, that I never planned to show anybody. And so I gave them the script, and they're like, we have no idea how to do this because we've never worked with big special effects or anything like that, but you know, let's give it a shot. Let's try it. So my great grandfather had left me a little bit of money, and the idea was that I would either use it for my education, and I was thinking about going to film school at the time, or I would put it into a business, some entrepreneurial enterprise. And I never really liked school. Like I always wanted to do my own thing. I never really liked school anyway. So I decided to put that money towards Crabs. And it was sort of the seed financing we got. And then I would go to everybody I knew to try to raise the rest of the money. And we raised most of the budget, enough to sort of go into production. And then we got about halfway into production and needed to raise more money. And once we had the first unit shot, then we partnered with a Canadian company in order to help us do all of our post-production. So we shot the movie in 2015, the A unit, and then the B unit, the green screen kaiju stuff, we shot in 2016. And then the drone footage we shot in 2017. So it took us like 3 years to shoot it, and then 4.5 years to do all the post-production, sound design, music, all that stuff. But I agree wholeheartedly with the advice that I got, which is like, you have no idea how long your movie is going to take, and you might have to be the only person. Like at points, I was the only person pushing the movie forward. Like if I decided that I was going to throw my hands up and be like, this is taking too long, I'm done with this, or I hate the project, or I just can't finish it, it never would have gotten made. So unless, as a director, as a writer, if you don't love your idea, like totally, completely love it and think it's amazing, then don't make that movie, because you might get stuck as the only person sort of holding the bucket for it for a long, long, long time.
Sounds like a marriage, honestly.
It is. I mean,
you have to work in a marriage. Like, don't get married to someone that you don't want to stay with, you know?
Yeah. I have a 7-year-old stepdaughter that is the same age as the movie.
Wow.
Really, yeah.
Well done on sticking with it. That is 7 years. That's a long time.
Yeah.
And probably a slightly blunt question, but after everything, the highs and lows of it, do you feel like it was all worth it?
Well, it's interesting. Yes, it was all worth it, because it's the best possible film education I ever could have gotten. Like,
nothing beats a hands-on education.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know what I was doing when I set out to start this, and now I understand how to put a movie together. Like and we did the whole movie cost about $500,000, but I understand how to do. I mean, every little detail of this project, like the middle monster design. So we've the 3 stages. We've got the little monsters. The voices of the little monsters were Chase, who the guy who plays Radu. The middle monsters, we couldn't afford to have somebody design monster sound effects, and so I had to learn how to edit monster sounds. And so I went and I, watched a bunch of YouTube videos and went into the BBC's natural history sound library and licensed like 200 different animal sounds and then cut them together in order to make those monster effect sounds. But now I know how to make monster effect sounds, and that's not something I knew how to do before. Or like, I knew nothing about how to do special effects and like green screen and post-production and tracking markers and doing matte paintings. And I mean, there's an endless amount of, and now I'm working on distribution. And 6 months ago, we first started getting our distribution letters in, or distribution offers in. And I learned about the distribution process and decided we're going to be self-distributing the movie in the US and the UK based on what I learned about where the distribution world is now. And then now I'm working on marketing. So I just had a conversation with the marketing team yesterday. And so, yes, it was definitely worth it in terms of getting an education. And I still like the movie. I mean, I've watched it, 100,000 times, but because it is the movie I really wanted to make, I don't hate it. I don't, and there's always parts, no matter how many times I've seen it, that I really would love to change and I'd love to tweak, and little things like, oh, there's not the push in there that we added in post in this one shot, and nobody's ever going to know that. But every time I watch it, I'm like,
yeah.
Yeah.
So,
but yeah, it was definitely worth it.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked quite a lot about the little ones and then the big one at the end. We've only touched slightly on the middle size creatures, which you said you made the sound effects for yourself. Well, you got from the files. What 2 animals or 3 animals did you mix together to make that sound, by the way?
A lot. There were seals, lemurs, pigs, donkeys. I think those are the main ones.
Bit of a mix.
The seals were pretty heavy in there, which is funny because there's a line about killer seals, and the seal sound is actually what's in the movie. But
yeah,
seals make a lot of odd sounds, to be fair.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, it's good that ups the ante and gives them something their height to kind of battle with, especially Ragu with his ninja sword, because he is a ninja.
Yeah.
And I just love it when he goes into the caravan, doesn't he? And one comes out the curtain, and it's just like, it's the Jurassic Park reference. I love that. Yeah, so
Jurassic
much.
Park is like, to me, that movie is like the gold star for what to shoot for when you're making a movie. I just think that's one of the best movies of all time. And I couldn't help rip it off.
So because the film's an hour 20 minutes, isn't it? I think off the top of my head, and you've got 3 different types of creature in it. Was there a lot more that you wanted to put in but couldn't because of time and or budget?
Yeah, there's a lot more. We shot for 22 days, and again, I didn't know what I was doing as a director. I had only ever shot movies where I'm the only person on the crew, basically. And so when I got to set, and there's 60 crew members, and everybody's building sets and doing everything, I didn't know what I was doing, and I didn't know what to prioritize. And it took me a good week to understand the flow and the structure of being on a big set as the director, and what are the most important things and what are things that I shouldn't be paying attention to. So the learning curve was wildly steep. And because of that, and because of we had all sorts of, everything that could have possibly gone wrong did go wrong. So just a quick example, the main characters live on this piece of property that's right by the river, and there's a barn there with that's like an old shipbuilding barn or ship repair barn, and they live in 2 trailers that are right next to the barn. Originally, none of that was in the script. They lived in suburbia, and he built the giant monster at the end out of train parts. But we lost both of those locations like a week before filming, found this new location, and then all of the stuff that we found in the barn were the pieces that we used to build the cockpit at the end of the movie, just because they were already in the barn. So it was this really serendipitous, like, can't believe that it worked out kind of thing. But because we kept on losing locations and I didn't know what I was doing, we had to condense a lot. And so a lot of the monster scenes, like the prom scene and the bar scene, were we probably had 2 extra pages of each of those of gags and effects and stuff that we weren't able to shoot. But the one scene that I really wish we could have had in the movie that wasn't there is we built 3 of the middle-sized monster suits, and there's only one shot in the whole movie that has all 3 of them. And the reason we needed 3 of them was for the scene that was going to be the ripoff of the kitchen scene from Jurassic Park in the auditorium of the school, where the stage is up front and all the seats are kind of like this. The after prom, after the hallway scene, instead of going into the classroom, they would go to the auditorium, and they would be in between the seats, the rows of seats. The main characters would be in between the rows of seats, and the monsters would come in from all sides, and they would stalk them through the rows of seats. And it was going to be the biggest sort of horror scene in the film. But it was too big of a set piece, and we just didn't have time for it. And we could only rent out the school for a certain number of days. And so it's just like, narratively, it was the only thing we could cut. So that scene got cut. But there's a number of things that got cut.
The auditorium got used again in the credits. And I love that. It's just like, someone's going to clean it all up. Crap.
That was a nightmare. That was a nightmare to clean up. Yeah, the wrestling team had a match the next day, and we had cleaned it up as best we could, but apparently the mats were still like sticking to the floor, so it was a nightmare to actually get them all up.
Okay, as a wrestler, I will say that those mats, they just stick anyways because they practice on them. So wrestling mats, like, it's not your fault, man. It's not your fault.
It was a little our fault. They were really sticky. There was a lot of blood in that gym at the end.
Oh, you mentioned earlier about like that would have been the scene with the most amount of horror. Thinking about the tone of your film, Pierce, how did you decide what type of tone to go for? Because I would kind of categorize Crabs as being a horror comedy. Does that sound fair?
Oh yeah, I mean, I would call it a comedy horror because we put so much into the comedy and not enough into the horror. But to me, originally it was going to be the horror element we were going to try to play up, and that blend of horror and comedy is really hard to get right because you want it to be a comedy, but you also actually want it to be a horror movie because, I think I failed at the horror element for a number of reasons, and it was a conscious decision to give up that. And part of that was that there's a number of reasons I ended up kind of giving up on the horror. Part of it was that once I started seeing how the suits would move, I realized we'd really have to mask them in order to have them be really scary because they're, big rubber suits. And so in order to get that to be terrifying, you wouldn't be able to show very much of it. And I wanted to show it. The other part was that when we transition from Act 2 to Act 3, and they build spoilers, but the characters build a mecha kaiju robot in the span of about 6 hours. And I knew that if I tried to sell you that, if I tried to sell an audience on that idea in any sort of logical framework, no one would be on board. No one would actually believe that they built this in 6 hours. And so when we filmed that scene, that was the moment where it was like, okay, we are now an absurdist movie. Like, we are going to go full Tim and Eric and give up on logic. And because in the script originally, we tried to logically do that. There was a couple of versions where we actually tried to, like, at one point there was a character that was going to be played by Christopher Lloyd, where he was going to be this UFO conspiracy theorist guy that worked at the school as a tech teacher, as like a shop teacher. And they would go to his workshop and he would actually have alien spacecrafts and all sorts of stuff that then would be used to build this giant robot, and parts of the robot were already built and there were going to be aliens. And anyway, that got scratched. And then we were going to use train parts and like have it try to logically be like, oh, Philip's been working on this for a while and this is his end goal and it just happens to work. And then it was like, that's too convenient. We're not going to do that. So when we got to the building of it, we literally had to wink and nod directly to the audience to be like, this is ridiculous. We as filmmakers know this is ridiculous. and we need you to know that we know it in order for you to accept what we're about to show you. Because if you think we're trying to be above you or like give you any information that's not like, this is what this is, no one's gonna be on board. And so once we filmed that scene, then we really knew, okay, we have to full on lean into the comedy aspects of this movie for it to sell, for it to work. And the other part of it was that once we started improvising, so Radu was in the script, like he had lines of dialogue, but it was like 2 days in before I committed to, Radu's going to be 99% improvised. And then once Radu started improving, then all the rest of the actors I wanted to start improving. And so the movie sort of took on a life of its own where we knew what the scenes were going to be. We knew what you needed to accomplish in the scene, but it no longer was rigid to the script. It was a lot more flexible. And so giving up the control there and letting it be more playful was one of the things that sort of led to it being more of a comedy movie than a horror movie.
It's interesting because one of our good friends, Alan Maxon, he's recently got into the filmmaking business. And when we had him on quite a while back, he said that when you're working with a tight budget, it's far cheaper to make a film that's stupid than scary. And he was saying it in a slightly self-depreciating way, but also in a very pragmatic way that, like, well, literally that like when he's made some of his earlier films, I know that Paul thinks very fondly of Christmas with Cookie, which is just objectively not a great movie. It's a very bad movie, and Alan will say that, but it was also very cheap, and it kind of created that platform to then do something a bit more ambitious. And then from that, what was his short movie that he made?
Patina.
What's it called? Patina.
Patina.
He made Patina, which was like actually quite frightening, and it was 6 minutes long, as opposed to like an hour long of kind of nonsense and silliness. He then kind of, larger budget, shorter film, but then the tone's very different. And it was just funny kind of watching your film, because I'll be totally honest, I went into the film expecting more of horror than the comedy. And initially I kind of thought, I'm not too sure about this, with all due respect. And then I thought, oh, it's a dumb stoner comedy. And I kind of then I got it, and I was on board. It's like, right, okay, I get it. I know what its target audience is. This film is self-aware. It's ridiculous. It knows it is. And then I was like, right, okay, I get it. But it took me a little while to kind of suss that out.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I knew there was a moment on like day 2 when I had to abandon the original sort of tone that I was trying to set in my mind about it being 50-50 horror comedy. And because I knew we were going to fail if we tried that. Like if we aimed at more horror, we would have failed. And I knew the level of horror that we could get. And once I sort of understood what we could achieve with what we had, and that's like, if I could give advice to any person who wants to, any filmmaker, do the best with the tools that you have. Don't wish for tools you don't have. Like don't try to make something that you're not going to be able to make with tools that aren't at your disposal. So, but try to make the best thing with the tools that you currently have, right? Do the best job you can with whatever you have in your basket of tools. And if you wanted to make something else, but you don't have the tools to make that, you're not going to make it, right? Make the thing you can make with the tools that you have. And so realizing that the tools we had were to make this absurdist comedy, we leaned completely into that and abandoned the idea that we had at the beginning of production. Like the scene, the scene where the deputy arrives to go and check on the sheriff and finds the porno tape in the VHS player. That was the second scene that we shot in the film. And his sort of being exhausted on the car and looking all like ragged, torn up, and then walking in and then having to, it was during that scene. So when we first filmed him outside with all the mood lighting and the bloody handprint, we were leaning into the horror there. And then once we got inside and we saw the creature coming out, that was sort of the moment where it's like, okay, this is the type of movie we're going to be making now. This is where we need to lean into, and we'll keep going from here. And I think it was ultimately for the best. I mean, I think that the story concept alone doesn't really lead itself to horror. And so I think there's a bit of like the movie was telling us, the story was telling us like this is the direction you need to go in order to achieve this. Because if we did take it too seriously, it wouldn't work. Like the premise itself is not a premise that would work if we took it any more seriously than we do. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that. Let's take our second break. When we return, let's explore some more elements within the film and give our own personal recommendations for other horror comedies, horrors, or straight up comedies. Thank you very much.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Kaiju Curry House. I'm Pierce Berolzheimer, the director of Crabs.
You didn't do it either.
Knew what?
Crabs!
Yeah, the exclamation mark.
Punctuation
Yeah,
is important, children.
P.S. I was thinking about parallels of other movies because, like, you were talking about how that line of the horror and the comedy is very tricky to walk. And Paul and Joe, I'm sure you can think of some similarities of other films. But has anyone seen the film Black Sheep?
Yes.
Set in New Zealand.
Yes.
When I was watching your film, I was thinking in terms about the tone. That's what it reminded me of because, like, it kind of ticks a lot of similar boxes because sheep are fairly innocuous. They're not particularly frightening. And the idea
Have
of
you ever seen their eyes? Oh,
well, in
Lord,
this film,
Alex.
they're quite frightening. But Black Sheep kind of, it walks that tricky line of at times it's just utterly stupid. And at the same time, it is a little bit freaky. So I was just thinking.
It can be a bit bad. That's for sure.
Yeah, felt good.
Paul, what horror comedies can you think of that match up with this?
Which the fun one thing that comes to mind, which isn't monsters at all, is The Visit. Have you seen that?
I don't know The Visit. No.
It's a fantastic horror film, and the director shot it in. She shot two versions. He shot it as a comedy, and he shot it as a horror, and he spliced the two together.
Oh, that's cool.
With different things. So it does seem like harmless and fun in one scene, and then it suddenly cuts to the horror version, and it's terrifying. And it's so brilliantly well done that it. I'm trying to think who did it now. I'm trying to think of the director, but yeah, it's about some kids who go to stay with their grandparents, and things are not what they seem. But it's seemingly funny, and then just takes a sinister turn. But it's a great horror with comedy elements, I guess. I mean, otherwise I'm just going to throw out Tremors, as you know. So I wanted to say something different.
You had to say Tremors at least once in the
At least once, yeah.
There are appearances to keep up, Paul.
But it's just Tremors. It's not Crabs, because I haven't said that yet. So
that was good. That was good.
Thank you.
But that's the loudest you've ever been, Paul. Well done.
I was going to say, I there is a film that, to a degree, I think has a lot in common with this, and I've been mentioning this film quite a bit, but I have to give the shout out again.
Oh.
Tammy and the T-Rex.
Oh, Tammy and the T-Rex.
Oh yeah,
you've mentioned
Tammy.
that. Yeah.
Tammy and the T-Rex definitely has some parallel lines with Crabs because in some elements it does have some horrific moments.
Really?
Yes, it
so
does.
I have to see this film. I really do.
It's good. It's definitely worth watching.
It is.
Is it a ride?
Its own beast.
Is it wild?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. You have to watch it after a few lemonades. Wink, wink, nod, nod. But and with friends, it is perfect with friends. Like Crabs. Crabs. You watch.
There we go.
You watch with your mates. Like this is a film. It's a beer and pizza movie, or should I say lemonade and pizza movie? But yeah, you totally sit down with your friends and watch Crabs because it's one of those films. It's fun. It is going to be a fun film. And yeah, like I said, like it is. There are moments where Crabs is definitely a horror film, like the opening scene on the face, and I think that it was actually like a minor stroke of genius, for it to leave his face right as something else happens, and the girlfriend has to think about, oh dear, and then comes up on her, and then you see her again later. Like it has horrific elements, but then at the same time it also has Radu in this film. So brilliant. It will definitely find its having fun venue.
I mean, there's definitely there's a niche in that market, isn't there? Because people do want monster movies that make them laugh, that they can drink a beer to with their friends. I think because monster movies are relevant at the moment, people are enjoying them, but there's that possible like need for a slightly more kind of R-rated, more violent monster movie that you can go and then laugh at, rather than say like a Godzilla movie, which is possibly a little bit tamer. But yeah, your movie manages to kind of have that harder element to it whilst being funny, which I like. I didn't come away feeling dirty, like, oh God, that was hideous. As I have done with some films.
And it doesn't take itself too seriously, like Sharktopus. Like Sharktopus took itself way too seriously for what it was. Yeah, that should have been a horror comedy, not a horror science fiction. Like that kind of thing. But yeah, Crabs is perfect in that respect. It has its tone and it knows what it is. So I have to give definite kudos for that.
Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to make sure that we never took it too seriously, because I've seen a couple movies that I had very specifically. I'm not gonna shit on anybody else's movies, but there's a couple films that have come out recently, horror movies, where they take them, so they've got a ridiculous premise and they take themselves way too seriously. And I was like, that is what we have to avoid. That's the one thing I want to avoid. I do not want a pretentious movie that should not be pretentious.
Yeah.
Can we call the Twilight films horror? I feel like that's a bit. It's going a bit far.
Another film that I appreciated recently, there was the reboot of the Chucky franchise, and it was the most recent Child's Play movie. And what I really enjoyed about it, I'm not like a huge Chucky fan, I've never really been bored about it, but it managed to kind of explore some of the kind of the controversial elements about Chucky of, childhood violence and kids watching things that are too violent makes them violent. And it tongue-in-cheek approached that. But then it also just went blatantly for the comedy. And at one point, the Chucky doll just gets a drone and then just flies it through a crowd of people and the blades cut up like all of the passers-by. And it knows exactly what it's doing. It's just like, this is going to be silly. And for that, I was able to sink some lemonades, Joe. And
have you seen the original Chucky?
I have not, no.
Oh, wow.
The original Chucky is a little bit more of a nuanced film, honestly.
Are you calling Chucky nuanced?
No. If you watch the original,
okay,
there's some like supernatural, like murdery detective-y vibes. Ooh. And
it's completely different, isn't it? Because in the remake, I think it's just a robot that's gone wrong. Whereas in the original, what is it? A serial killer's spirits in the doll. It's
Chucky got progressively more wacky as time went on. Yeah, I think that's the way to go, because the original Chucky had, if you've ever seen it, like there was a series of short films, and then one of them, it was called Trilogy of Terror. And there was kind of like a voodoo doll, and it was chasing a woman around her apartment. And the original Chucky has vibes very in keeping with that short film. And I think, whilst it's not necessarily my cup of tea, I can respect it as a film because it took itself seriously enough, but at the same time, the serial killer's frustration that he was in the child's doll was also a thing. And then like you knew it was in the doll, and like the serial killer was pretending to be the doll at some points. Like it gave like a creepy vibe. But we're not here to necessarily talk about Chucky. No. We're here to talk about crabs.
P.S. What are your aspirations for the future in filmmaking?
I've got a couple other projects I want to make. I just want to keep making movies. Good. Whether that's getting hired on other people's films or making my own, I'm happy. My favorite thing in the whole world is just being on set, working with actors and shooting stuff. So whatever project that is, I'm happy doing it, really.
Would it be monsters?
I have Crabs 2 ideas, Crabs 3 ideas. Like I could, if Crabs does well, I could definitely make more of these, and all the actors are on board to do more. So I have Radu spin-off ideas. There's a couple specifically Radu movies I want to make.
Radu, Night Ninja.
Yeah, well, I have this ridiculous idea, which is basically to do a spin-off of Crabs where it follows Radu from the moment he leaves the alleyway until the moment he shows up again, and it's basically After Hours. It's like a remake of After Hours, but with Radu.
This is
so
lore
there's not
building.
really any crabs in it. It's like a Martin Scorsese sort of film, but featuring Radu in this small town, and it would sort of have like After Hours meets The Big Lebowski, but with Radu, and there's no crabs involved at all until he shows back up. That's a ridiculous movie. But I have this other film that I'm working on with Chase, that is basically David Attenborough versus Steve Irwin. Chase and his
Ooh,
brother
I don't know who
character.
I'd have to back Steve Irwin on that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but I would do it we're going to do it in a mockumentary style, like Best in Show, where the whole thing is a behind the scenes of this rivalry between these two sort of, and we're not going to call them David Attenborough or Steve Irwin, but that's the gist, is like the two different methods of communicating the importance of wildlife. One of them is I'm going to go grab it by the tail. And the other one is like, look at the majesty and beauty of nature and how amazing like little intricate details are. And so it's these two characters that have to work on a project together and don't agree on the mode of how to tell this nature documentary story. Then I have an action movie that I'd really like to make that is more or less The Northman, but I haven't seen The Northman yet, and that's doing really well. So I'm not sure I'm going to start pitching that movie. But it's basically a revenge story that I think of as like The Raid in medieval times, or John Wick in medieval times.
I love The Raid.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
So speaking of your actors, you were blessed with some really fun actors on this film. How did you find them?
A casting agent. We had I had never worked with a casting agent before, but one of our producers knew this guy, Paul Ruddy, in LA. And he, we gave a general description of the type of character we wanted, like what their personality is, if they're goofy, if they're more serious, if we want like the old sheriff character trope, and he sent a bunch of auditions, and some of the actors took a really long time, like Bryce Durfee, who plays Hunter. We saw maybe 30 people for that role. I mean, we could not find somebody for the longest time until we found Bryce, and Bryce was very obvious once we finally got him. But there were a lot of people that auditioned for that role, and we just couldn't. It was like, no, that's not right. That tone's not right. Because his character, we really wanted somebody that was like innocent but goofy, but could also have that leading character, the leading man sort of vibe as well. And that is a hard thing to find. Of every character that we found, that was one of the hardest. And Radu was also incredibly difficult because that accent that Radu does, I did not want to be from anywhere. I didn't want him to represent any type of person that exists on the planet. I wanted to create a caricature of a caricature. So
it's kind of like in Ghostbusters 2. It's just like when Venkman asks, "Where the hell are you from?" You wanted that accent, yeah.
I wanted somebody that's like could never offend anybody because he doesn't exist. And the accent changes over the course of the movie, and he doesn't exist anywhere. And like all of his fake language is made up, and his, he talks about his currency, it's a made up currency. And so a lot of people, but a lot of the auditions wanted to go with very specific accents. And so it took a while to find somebody that wasn't doing sort of a put on caricature of a type of person. And so when Chase auditioned, I mean, originally Roddy was supposed to be about 14. And then Chase auditioned, and we're like, we had to wrap our head around, okay, well, maybe he's this amazing tennis star, and they imported him from his home country because they needed somebody great on their tennis team at the local high school, or because he looks significantly older than everybody else. So that was a little challenging. But like Allie Jennings, who plays Maddie, was the first person we saw. We just cast her immediately. Jessica was on my short list of actresses for that role, but then before even telling our casting director about it, Jessica just showed up at the audition and was like, "Oh, that's serendipitous. Okay, you're cast immediately." And then Dylan, we actually cast somebody else first. And the other actor arrived on set, and we shot a whole day with him. And then he went and broke his arm skateboarding that night. And so we had 24 hours to recast the role. And we found Dylan. Dylan read the script, and we were like, yeah, get on out here. And I met him 5 minutes before we shot the first scene with him, and he was amazing. And like, I was really, one of the things I was concerned about was he's in a wheelchair for 90% of the film, and I wanted to be able to get that right. Like, I wanted to make sure that we did that as authentically as we possibly could. And so I'd watched YouTube videos about, different people in different circumstances and the way that they looked in a wheelchair and the way they moved, so that I could give, directorial notes to Dylan on if I needed to. Turned out I didn't need to at all. He just has such control over his body that I didn't have to give him one physical direction the entire time we're on set. Like, that's all him. He just
It's brilliant.
took it on, and yeah.
Do you have any recommendations for young actors and actresses to stand out, like during casting calls? Like, what drew you to those particular actors, like other than obvious need in some cases?
I mean, I think
Did they just pass the vibe check?
Yeah, I just passed the vibe check. I mean, no, so the first thing is, none of them tried too hard. They all just were the character. Like, they part of it is, this is going to be discouraging. But part of it is that the director has the character in their head already. So either you're that character or you're not that character. And unfortunately, it sort of comes down to that. Unless you are doing something so different that it's like Radu, like Chase was doing something so outside of the realm of what I was picturing, that it was, oh, we have to pivot the movie because you're so different and great, that you're bringing something to the table that I didn't even think of. And so we're gonna change the type of movie to fit you into this because you're so good. Then the rest of the actors were really, I had a feeling for the type of characters and the way that they would interact. And so I was looking for an actor that had that feeling there in the auditions. And sometimes it was immediately obvious, like Allie, where we didn't even need to see anybody else. It was just like, I put a description of, this is the type of character I would like. The casting director said, I have somebody for you. Here is their audition. That is the character. Thank you very much. Let's move on. Or it was somebody like Bryce, where it's a very sort of nuanced type of character where, I knew it was something that I would have to look through a bunch of people to be able to find, because we found people that were like obviously leading man, like without a doubt leading man, but they didn't have the goofiness. And it was like obviously goofy, but they couldn't do the leading man thing. So it was like, we needed somebody that fit that very specific sliver of type of character. And so no matter how great you were at being a leading man, that wasn't what we were looking for. And so keep auditioning. Obviously, my advice would be just like endlessly audition, because eventually your type will be the thing that somebody is looking for some story that somebody out there wants to tell. And don't give up because you weren't, like, I would say never get discouraged because you didn't get the role, because you're an individually unique type of person and you just might not be the very specific thing that story was looking for, right? And the other piece of advice I would have is to like know your role in terms of what was on the page. So every actor we worked with came to set knowing every line of dialogue flawlessly every single time. Never had to look at notes, never had to rememorize things, never got stuck on a take. Every single time we would show up on set, they would know what line we're doing, what scene. They would have that memorized. So we did no rehearsals on this thing. And part of that is just because the actors were so professional and so good. So if you're an actor, number one most important thing in the whole world, because I've been on sets where actors don't do that and the crew and everybody ends up hating them. And it is the type of thing where all of those people will go and talk to everybody else that they know and say, so-and-so is a miserable actor to work with because they don't remember their lines. They don't care to remember their lines. They just want to do their own thing. think that they, are good enough that they don't have to remember their lines or whatever. It just becomes this horrible situation on set where we're waiting on one person to just get their job correct, and that is their job. So first advice would be get that down, learn how to do that, never have to think about it again. The next thing would be never get discouraged because you're not getting the role. Keep auditioning, because eventually somebody will be looking for exactly you. But it's like dating. It's like if you date a bunch of people, it's not really you can date a bunch of people and it never be anybody else's fault that like it didn't work out, because everybody's just looking for the thing they're looking for. And if you're not it's like not the end of the world. It's like, it's not a big deal. It doesn't have to be a big deal that you weren't what somebody was looking for. And I think casting is very much like dating. Like, you have in your brain the things you're looking for. And if you want to date a doctor, don't date a filmmaker, right? Like, you're not going to be happy dating the filmmaker if what you really want is dating a doctor. So it's the same with casting, I think.
I recently talked with a director, and one of the things that they said was it's a lot like recipes. And the example that they used is like, I know how to put a pizza together. I love, like this, that, and the other pizza, with these ingredients. They're just like what you need. I might love pineapple, but pineapple might not be right for the pizza. So it was fun. It was funny. It made total sense, because you can have all the ingredients and pineapple can be right, for like all sorts of other things, but for that pizza, no.
That's totally exactly right. Like if you're making a pineapple agua fresca, you want the pineapple, you don't want the pepperoni, right? Like, but you might really want the pepperoni for the pizza. So that is I'm going to steal that, because that is a absolutely apt analogy.
It is time for us to wrap up, so we will close with our personal recommendations. Thinking on Crabs, I think it's very important listeners do check out the film. What rating is it in the US? Is it R?
We're not going to have a rating because we're self-distributing it, but it's R. My personal thought is like
15 or older.
15.
There you go. Okay, so just covering our backs, it's a 15 or older.
Yep.
So
how do we see it?
Crabs.
Where do we find Crabs? How are you distributing it in the UK?
I am going to be putting it on iTunes, not Netflix. iTunes, Amazon, Google Play, and Vudu. It'll be it's called a TVOD release, so it'll be available to buy and rent on all of the major platforms. And then sometime after that, we may do a streaming deal, depending on how that does. And then we'll definitely go to AVOD, which is Tubi and Pluto and some of the other like advertising on demand services. But to start out, it'll just be on iTunes, Amazon, Google Play, stuff like that. And sometime this summer, I'm guessing mid to late July is when it'll be out.
Perfect. So there you go, folks. Do check out Crabs. It's coming out pretty soon in the UK. Paul, if nothing else, what would you recommend?
If nothing else, I know we've been talking about what inspired some of the film, and you've talked about Gremlins a lot. And I think a film that's quite often overlooked, but is very similar to Gremlins, and something that I was terrified of as a child, would be Critters.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen that.
Those Krites, man, I'm telling you what, they keep coming back.
There's now 5 films and a TV series. So
there's a TV series for Critters?
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. It's amazing how many legs that, it's, yeah. But I remember watching that as a kid, because my brother's 10 years older, so he would watch these films, and it was like a horror comedy, but to me, it was just pure horror. These little creatures. So I was terrified. But great film.
Lord.
Yeah, I love it now.
Critters is still alive. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's still going.
There we go. You are just a wealth of information, Paul.
I'm going to recommend that you do check out Black Sheep. It's one of my favorite horror comedies. It's it's great fun. It's set in New Zealand. Not many horror films are set in New Zealand, and it's about killer sheep. It's hilarious. Joe?
Well, I'm going to say that when I watched Black Sheep, I did watch it with a Kiwi, and the whole time he was just like, oh my God. It's just like head and hands, like, oh my God. It was brilliant. If you can find a Kiwi to watch it with you, they are quite a rare breed, all things considered, but do it. So I'm going to go ahead and give Crabs a shout, get a couple of friends together, order that pizza, get that lemonade, and have a fun night. Additionally, I'm going to recommend a book, as I often do.
You do.
But Paul can back me up on this one. If you like the arthropod horror, which I guess horseshoe crabs aren't actually arthropods, but anyways, going forward, are they? I can't remember. But check out Fragment by Warren Fay, which yeah, it is a great book. We've had Warren on the podcast. It has a sequel, and it's really great for a variety of reasons. The other film that I'm going to give a shout out to is another independent film. It's called The Howl from Beyond the Fog. Daisuke Sato released it. It would have been last year now?
2 years ago now.
2 years.
2 years ago.
Wow, time flies, but it's still a great art picture. It's lovely for a variety of reasons, and it's widely available now, which is the great bit. So check out those 3 things that I've recommended. Anyways, that's us for this evening's recording in the UK. And as always, we'd like to sign off by thanking you, our lovely listeners, and keep it kaiju.